From the outside, everything seemed perfect in our family. My dad, a successful businessman, had built an empire from the ground up, and Olivia, my older sister, was the star of the show. She was the one who had everything handed to her on a silver platter. Everyone admired her: dad, mom, friends, even extended family. It wasn't just her beauty or intelligence, it was how effortlessly she charmed everyone around her. Olivia was, in every sense, the golden child. As for me, I was always the quieter, more reserved one, the second child. While Olivia thrived in the spotlight, I was the one behind the scenes, trying to make a name for myself. But no matter how hard I worked, it felt like I was always playing catch-up. Dad was always too busy, too preoccupied with his business, to notice the effort I was putting in. Olivia, on the other hand, never had to lift a finger. She was the one Dad would praise, the one he'd confide in, the one he would take to business dinners. She was the one everyone trusted. I didn't mind at first. I convinced myself that being the second child was just how it was supposed to be. Olivia had been the first to succeed, the first to get attention, the first to inherit Dad's approval. But over time, that mentality began to eat at me. Why did she get all the breaks? Why was she the one everyone depended on, while I was expected to figure everything out on my own? It all started to feel unfair. And when I went off to college, the gap between us only grew wider. Olivia was given everything: tuition, housing, cars, and extravagant gifts. Meanwhile, I was struggling to make ends meet. I worked part-time jobs, took out loans, and stretched every dollar I had just to get by. I never complained, but deep down, I began to resent the fact that she never had to work for anything. The more I watched her get everything handed to her, the more it became clear to me. Dad had no intention of ever helping me the way he helped her. But the real shock came when I overheard a conversation between my parents one evening. They were talking about the family business. Dad had decided it was time to pass on the torch. And guess who the torch was being handed to? Olivia. Not me. After all my hard work, after all the sacrifices I had made, Olivia was going to inherit everything. Dad was planning to make her the CEO, to give her full control of everything he'd built, all the while leaving me to fend for myself. That was the moment it hit me. It wasn't just about the money or the privileges anymore. It was about being overlooked for years, of being treated like a backup plan, a second choice. I had always been pushed aside, forced to take the back seat while Olivia got everything she wanted. But that was about to change. I realized that I wasn't just fighting for recognition anymore. I was fighting for my future, for everything I had worked for and was denied. And if Dad wasn't going to give me what I deserved, I was going to take it. No more waiting, no more asking for permission. I was going to take what was rightfully mine. I was never the center of attention in our family. My dad had high expectations for me, but they always felt like a distant dream. It was clear that he had already decided who his heir would be, and that was Olivia. She was always the one he took to business meetings, the one he groomed for success. And me? Well, I was just expected to be the supportive, less demanding younger sibling. At first, I didn't mind. I admired Olivia. She was everything I wasn't: outgoing, confident, and always the life of the party. I was content to stand on the sidelines, focusing on my studies and doing what I could to get by. But over the years, I began to feel like an outsider in my own family. It wasn't just the attention Olivia got. It was the way my dad treated us differently. He praised her achievements, showered her with gifts, and made sure she was always at the top of her game. As for me, it seemed like I could never do enough to win his approval. No matter how hard I tried, he always seemed to brush me off or give me minimal attention. If I did something great, it was never met with the same enthusiasm. If Olivia did the same thing, she was celebrated like a queen. I thought maybe I was just imagining things at first, but then it started becoming clearer. I went to college with high hopes, determined to carve my own path. But that's when the disparity hit me like a ton of bricks. Olivia had everything handed to her: tuition paid in full, a brand new car, and regular deposits into her account. Meanwhile, I was drowning in student loans, taking on multiple jobs just to make ends meet. I remember one particular incident when I told my dad about my struggles. I was hoping for some support, a loan, or maybe even a job at one of his companies. Instead, he simply told me to figure it out because that's what life is about. I was crushed. I had always believed that my dad would be there for me, that he would support me when I needed it most. But it seemed like I was nothing more than an afterthought. Olivia, on the other hand, was always getting the best of everything. It wasn't just about the money, it was the emotional support, the validation, the belief that she was worthy of everything. I began to feel a sense of resentment building inside me. Why was I always expected to settle for less? Why wasn't I good enough in my dad's eyes? It started eating at me, and it didn't help that Olivia never even noticed. She had her own world, her own life, and I was just a bystander. As I began to grow older and more independent, I started to question everything. I worked hard, got good grades, and made my own way in the world. But every time I thought I was getting ahead, I would remember how Olivia got ahead simply by being born first. My dad never had to tell her to figure it out because she had the world handed to her. I started to feel like I was fighting an uphill battle, one that I could never win. Then, as I began to find my footing after college, I learned of my dad's plans. He was passing on the business to Olivia. It was a decision that had been made for years, and I was never part of the equation. Even though I had spent years working hard, trying to prove my worth, I had always been the backup plan, the second choice. I wasn't even in the running for the business. The one thing my dad had worked his entire life to build was going to Olivia, with no consideration for the person who had been by his side every step of the way. That's when I realized I had been ignored, dismissed, and taken for granted for far too long. My dad never thought I was capable of running the business. Olivia was the one who was going to inherit it all, but I was done playing by his rules. If they didn't think I deserved a shot, then I would take it for myself. No more being the second choice, no more being the one left behind. Once I realized how deep the favoritism ran, something inside me shifted. I was no longer the passive observer in my own life. I had been silently watching my family, especially Olivia, for years, and now I knew I had to do something about it. It wasn't just about taking the business from Olivia. It was about proving to myself that I wasn't just the afterthought, the second choice. I deserved more than just the scraps they had given me. The first step was understanding exactly how much leverage I had. Olivia had been handed everything on a silver platter. There was no denying that. But I had learned how to survive on my own. If I wanted to take what was rightfully mine, I needed to know exactly where I stood. I started with small things. I began to study the business. It wasn't something that came easily to me. I didn't have the years of experience Olivia did, and Dad hadn't exactly been hands-on with me in terms of teaching me the ropes. But I was determined. Every time I had a moment, I would go through company records, studying financials, and looking at contracts. Slowly, I began to piece together a picture of the family empire. There was more to it than I initially thought. More opportunities, more potential. I wasn't just going to take over. I was going to make it bigger, more successful than anyone imagined. While I did that, I kept my distance from my dad and Olivia. I knew they were both watching me with suspicion, especially Olivia. She was confident that the business was hers, but that confidence made her careless. She had no idea what I was up to. She believed that since Dad had already made his decision, there was no reason to even consider me as a competitor. That arrogance would be her downfall. It wasn't until I overheard a conversation between my dad and Olivia one afternoon that I knew for sure she was already planning for the future, and she hadn't even considered me in the equation. I had been right all along. My dad didn't think I was capable of running the business. But what he didn't know was that I was preparing in silence, learning everything I could about the company, and positioning myself to take control. The more I found out, the more I realized that my dad's faith in Olivia was misplaced. She was managing things poorly, cutting corners, and letting important aspects of the business slip through the cracks. It was a delicate operation, and she wasn't nearly as capable as she thought. The more I discovered, the more the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Olivia wasn't prepared to handle what Dad had given her. She lacked the business acumen, the drive, and even the basic organizational skills needed to keep things running smoothly. It wasn't that I was jealous of her success. It was that I knew she was about to ruin everything my dad had worked for, and I couldn't let that happen. So I made my move. Quietly, I started building my own network of contacts, lawyers, accountants, and investors who saw potential in me, not Olivia. I got my hands on more confidential company information. I started laying the groundwork for a power play that would put me in control of everything. I knew I couldn't do it alone, but I also knew that Olivia would never see me coming. The plan was simple. I would expose her weaknesses and show my dad that I was the one who could save the business, not her. It wasn't about the money or the legacy. It was about proving that I wasn't just a side character in this family story. I was the one who could take it all to the next level. But I had to be patient. Olivia was too confident, and I needed to bide my time, watch, and wait for the perfect moment to strike. Every time she made a mistake, I noted it. Every time she made a decision that hurt the company, I kept track. I was gathering my evidence, ready to put the plan into action when the time was right. The more I watched her flounder, the more I felt the power shifting. I wasn't the powerless second child anymore. I was becoming someone who could change everything. And when the moment came, I would take control, not just of the business, but of my future. It was all in my hands now. The day I had been preparing for finally arrived, and I could feel the tension in the air. Everything I had done, every step I had taken, was now about to culminate in one defining moment. Olivia, in her usual overconfident manner, was about to make a huge mistake that would seal her fate, and I was going to make sure it cost her everything. It started when Dad called a family meeting. I had known this was coming. He had promised to announce his final decision about the future of the business, and Olivia had been expecting it to be in her favor. She had no idea that things had been slowly falling apart behind the scenes. Dad, despite his blind trust in her, was beginning to see the cracks in her leadership, but he didn't know the full extent of what was happening or the mistakes she had been making. At the dinner table, the tension was palpable. Olivia was sitting there, practically glowing with confidence, her usual sense of entitlement oozing from every word. Dad, on the other hand, was a bit more subdued. He wasn't as confident as he usually was, but he was still holding on to the belief that Olivia was the right choice. He looked at me with an almost sad smile, as if he knew what was coming, but didn't want to face it. Then, without warning, I dropped the bombshell. "I think it's time we talk about the future of this company," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But not just the future, Dad. I think it's time we look at how things are going right now. And Olivia, I think you need to hear this." Olivia's expression faltered for the first time that evening. She glanced at me, trying to read my face, but I wasn't giving anything away. I knew exactly what she had done, and now it was time to make her pay for it. I stood up and walked over to the table where I had laid out a stack of papers, financial reports, contracts, and email threads detailing all of Olivia's mistakes. I'd been gathering this information for weeks, and now I was ready to show my dad just how badly she had mismanaged the business. "Olivia," I said, "you've been making decisions that are hurting this company. You've been making deals without consulting anyone. You've been wasting money on pointless projects, and you've been taking risks that are putting everything we've built in jeopardy." I could see her face turning red. She was trying to hold it together, but it was clear she wasn't prepared for this. She had always been able to charm her way out of situations, but not this time. I had the facts, and she couldn't deny them. I slid the first report in front of Dad. "Here's the proof," I said, my voice growing louder now. "This is the financial overview of the past 6 months. Do you see the huge losses from the investments Olivia pushed through without consulting anyone? And here, this is the contract she signed with that third-party vendor who overcharged us by 30%. Do you remember her boasting about how well she was handling things? These are the results." I watched as Dad's face shifted from confusion to disbelief. He couldn't deny what was right in front of him. Olivia tried to speak up, but her words were lost in the weight of the evidence. I wasn't done yet. I opened the next set of documents. This is where it gets even worse. Olivia approved a major merger without even running background checks on the other company. We're about to lose a significant portion of our clients, and it's all because she failed to do her due diligence. For a moment, there was silence. Olivia was visibly shaken now, trying to find a way to cover herself. But she was losing control. Dad's face was pale, and I could see the regret in his eyes. He had trusted Olivia too much, and now it was too late to fix it. "Dad," I said, locking eyes with him, "you've been blind to this. You've been so focused on Olivia, thinking she was the perfect choice. But I've been here, working behind the scenes, learning everything I can to fix this. I'm not just capable of running this company, I'm the one who can save it." Olivia stood up, fury in her eyes. "You don't know anything. You've always been nothing but a shadow of me. You can't run this company. You're nothing compared to me." But I didn't flinch. "I'm not trying to be like you, Olivia. I'm here to fix what you've broken." With one final devastating blow, I slid a final piece of evidence across the table. A letter from an investor who had pulled out due to Olivia's reckless decisions. "This is the end of the line, Olivia. You've lost everything. And now, it's time for you to step down." I watched as Olivia's entire demeanor collapsed. The confident, entitled person I had grown up resenting was now exposed for the fraud she had always been. She had no response, no comeback. She had been outsmarted, outplayed, and now she had lost it all. I turned to Dad. "It's time for a change. I've already put together a team to turn things around, and I'm ready to take over." Dad looked at me, the weight of everything settling in. He was speechless, but I could see the relief in his eyes. He knew I was the one who could take this company to the next level. I wasn't just the second choice anymore, I was in control. In the weeks that followed, the fallout from the meeting was swift and unforgiving. Olivia tried everything to regain control, but it was too late. My dad's faith in her had been shattered, and the truth about her mismanagement had been laid bare. Despite her best efforts to salvage her position, it was clear that her grip on the company was slipping. Investors who once trusted her began to pull out, and key staff members started resigning in frustration. Olivia even tried to play the victim, telling anyone who would listen that I had manipulated Dad into turning on her. But no one was buying it. The evidence was there in black and white, and as her once perfect world crumbled, she became a shadow of the confident woman she had once been. People saw her for what she truly was, a spoiled, entitled woman who had never had to work for anything in her life, and now she was paying the price for it. As for me, things were starting to change in ways I had never imagined. The business began to recover under my leadership. The investments that Olivia had carelessly made were undone, the contracts restructured, and clients started returning as they saw a shift in the company's direction. My team and I worked tirelessly, fixing the mistakes she had left behind. It was exhausting, but it felt like a victory in every small success. Dad was silent for the first few days, watching me from a distance. But it didn't take long for him to realize that I was exactly what the company needed. He was still in shock over how everything had played out. But he finally came to terms with the fact that I was the one who could take the business forward. I wasn't just the backup plan anymore, I was the plan. Eventually, Dad pulled me aside one evening, and for the first time, he told me how proud he was of me. It was the moment I had been waiting for, but when it came, I realized I didn't need his approval anymore. I had already proven myself. I had taken control of my life, of my future, and I had done it on my terms. As the months passed, Olivia faded further into the background. She tried to make a comeback, but no one was interested in her apologies or excuses. She was left out of family events, cut off from the business, and eventually, she stopped trying altogether. It was a painful reality for her, but she had only herself to blame. She had squandered every opportunity and believed that her position was unassailable. I watched her lose everything with a sense of finality. I had been the one who had been overlooked, but now I was the one in control. In the end, the company flourished under my leadership. I expanded it, took risks that paid off, and grew it into something my dad could never have imagined. I didn't just take what was mine, I created a legacy that was uniquely my own. I wasn't defined by anyone else's expectations anymore. And Olivia? She eventually left the city, moving away to start over. She tried to rebuild her life, but it wasn't the same. The once golden child of the family had lost everything, and there was no coming back from that. I heard from a few mutual friends that she was still bitter, still angry, but that didn't matter to me anymore. I had moved on. As for me, I had the respect I deserved, the success I had worked for, and the freedom to live my life without constantly being compared to someone else. I had taken everything that was rightfully mine, not just in terms of the business, but in terms of my own identity. And the best part? I didn't need anyone's validation to know that I had earned it. The final chapter had been written, and I was the one holding the pen. I had shown everyone, including myself, that I was capable of far more than they had ever believed.